So today Jesus tells us a parable where a landowner decides to go away, and before he does so he gives some talent, some money to his servants to invest, to make some money when he's away. Who wouldn't want to do that if you had the people to do it for you? So to one he gave 5 talents, to another he gave 2, and to a third he gave 1 talent. The one who had 5 and the one who had 2 went and traded. They invested it, and they managed to double their money. Now, to double your money takes some feat. To double your money means that you have to take risks, big risks, and sometimes you lose, sometimes you win, but it is risky. If you want to double your money, if you put it in a bank and have a guaranteed interest rate of say 5%, it will take you 14 and a half years to double your money. At today's interest rate, it will take you about 700 years to double your money. So there is no doubt that the more you want, the bigger the return, the riskier you have to play. And then there was another person who got 1 talent, and instead of doing something risky, he decided that he would do a different tack. He would dig a hole, he would bury it, and he would leave it and see what happened. And so, as the master was about to return, the servant went and got his talent, dug it up, and saw that it was still there. He thought he was home and dry. He thought he was the one who was going to get all the plaudits, because he'd taken what he'd been given and kept it safe. But what he didn't bank on were the others playing the high stakes game, for they doubled their money. Perhaps in risky investments, perhaps in all sorts of activity, but he'd kept it safe. And instead of being applauded for what he did, he was thrown out into the darkness. And we often think of this parable as something to do with our relationship with God, about how we should take what we've been given, our gifts, our talents, and grow them for the kingdom. In the same way that the landowner gave talents to his servants, so God gives us talents that we have to look after and grow and develop. But that causes some problems as well. What if there was a different way to interpret this parable? What do I mean that we can think about this parable in different ways? Well, think about those who risked the master's talents. They were rewarded at the end of this parable for it had gone well. But what would have happened if things had gone badly? What would have happened if they'd have lost everything? What would have happened if there had been a coronavirus that had wiped out the markets and the traders, and they had returned with nothing when the master came? Then the person who had buried it would have been the hero of the story. But there's another, perhaps more radical way to look at this passage. Very often we compare the landowner to God. You know, God gives us talents, God asks us to use talents, and we grow them for him. We've all used it in that way. But that always leaves us with a problem as to how God punishes when things don't go quite right with our talents. Is that the God that we worship? We live in a society that ultimately seems to reward those who take risks. How often have we seen big companies be rewarded for taking risks that have put the lives and the livelihoods of all their workers in jeopardy? Yet they're rewarded, they're congratulated for taking those risks. We live in a society that does reward risk, that does reward sometimes recklessness. And I'm not entirely convinced that that's where God is. Perhaps this parable is encouraging us to think about how we might be like the person who buried their talent. Not playing into the world's narrative of risking what we've been given for extra reward, but taking what we've been given and being good stewards of it, looking after it, caring for it, so that there's something left at the end of the story. Perhaps we're being told not to take unnecessary risk, not to sit about doing nothing either, for the servant didn't. He went and dug the hole and presumably went back and checked on it and made sure it was all okay, because he didn't want to lose that. He knew what the consequences would be. Perhaps we're being told to look at things in a different way. As people of God, as Christians, that we're being told not to play into the world's story and the world's narrative of being reckless and rewarding those who have more. Perhaps it's about us remembering that everyone has a worth, that everyone is loved, and that everyone has a job to do. Perhaps this story is telling us that we ought to take care of that which God has given us and not risk it unnecessarily. Yes, use it. Yes, grow it. Yes, develop it. But not risk it so there's nothing left. How we view God perhaps defines how we view this parable and how we view the servants that are a part of it. Where are you in this story? Who are you in this story? And what does that say about your relationship and your understanding with God? Think about it. Don't risk what you've got. Don't take unnecessary risk. Be who you are. Be who God has asked you to be, and use what God has given you. Develop it. Steward it. Keep nurturing it. And whatever you do, make sure you don't lose it.